Okay, so first of all, can you hear me? Then we can get started on the comic discussion stream. Okay, so it seems like people can hear me, so let me switch to this. Hello, everyone. So yes, we have a comic to review. It's been out like a week and a bit now, getting close to 2 weeks. Um, I think it's fair to say the hype for the new comic release, given that it is the only comic release of the year, has not really been there. I've noticed it in terms of the views on the videos I've put out about it, and just in general across the fandom, I haven't really seen many people talking about this. Now, I think part of that is, again, like we discussed with the Roku novel, very poor marketing. Like, I don't, I wasn't really paying too much attention, I think, to like Dark Horse's social media or even like what the Avatar YouTube was doing, but I don't remember just randomly coming across, I think, other people beyond myself talking about this book or highlighting that it's actually out. There's certainly a group of fans, I think, that the most hardcore who follow all the publishing that's interested is following it, but overall, not really feeling it for the most part in terms of like what's going on here. And it's not because the quality of the book. I'm not really sure that is the problem at all, but it is very notable that the Azula book, even though it was also kind of messily handled, I would say it also didn't have particularly great marketing. That book had, hype behind it. And I don't think the character stuff is the problem, because like it's Iroh on the cover here, and I don't think June is a like detraction kind of point from the book. If anything, that's a positive. It's just that I do think it is a thing that impacts people, that this is the only comic that's out this year and there's nothing else. Like, this kind of should be the extra book, but it's the main event comic for Dark Horse, and we don't even have like a Korra book to kind of even it out until next year. So a lot of that stuff is I think part of why this is happening, because I think we all know the one shots are not like massively important pieces of content, but there's a big difference, I think, between, in a way, the potential and the discussion that the Azula comic created, and I think what a lot of the other ones have been about. And then, yeah, I think that's the other point, is like, so long between comics. Like, you can't be going nearly an entire year between comics. Like, it was October 31st, where like we're like 10 months later here, kind of getting this one out. That's not good enough in my mind. Probably doesn't help that like everything is dropped all at once. I think to a certain degree, probably people are still reading Roku and other stuff, but I think that's also a big kind of part of it. Just everything hitting all at once. I do hope Dark Horse deliver at like New York Comic Con, so we have kind of stuff to kind of go on. But yeah, I guess we can kind of get into discussing this, of course. So yeah, an interesting kind of slight format change for this one, where we went from very clearly the book being promoted on the basis of like one of the main characters to now it's Iroh with June. But the reality of the book is that it's probably actually more better said as like it's June with Iroh, because while Iroh has like a plot in this book, his plot is definitely, I would say, like gets the least amount of pages compared to the June arc, and that like when it comes to like the finale happening, it's June's decisions driving the story forward. And so it is very much the idea of like, for kind of marketing purposes, like you kind of have to have a main character on the front, because while I think hardcore fans like us, we would read and we would buy a book that is just like June alone or something like that, you understand why that maybe doesn't have the broad appeal of some of the other stuff. So it's an interesting one. I'm interested to see if they continue to experiment kind of with this. Like, to a certain degree, you could say Katara and the Pirate Silver was kind of like this. It was just that the side character that got promoted, Jang, was a character we didn't know about before. And no, she wasn't included on the cover, but you know, it's a similar style of thing. As I've talked about already, you know, I think it's a good book. Like, that's the kind of the big thing to say here. It is a good book. Like, the quality remains high on all of the comics. Obviously, the only thing is just that as a one shot, I think it's difficult to get like massively excited because, as we discussed, it is the only release of the year, and it's not the most impactful book we've ever had. But it's an interesting one. We get the main character, minor character kind of dynamic, which could be interesting in more books. So, you know, June getting the focus while we get a little bit of Iroh backstory is a nice mix. So yeah, more people coming into the chat here. Yes, all is well. I would say, and we'll get into this more later on, the only criticism I have, and I think it's a small-ish criticism, is just that I do feel the June backstory we get in the book is a bit disconnected from what the present-day story is, and the usual sense of, like, when you include backstory in a book, it's to kind of thematically interlink into what the character is going through in the present day. And while I think you can make connections, I don't think the kind of writing, the writer's intent is kind of necessarily super clear. Like, there's a lot of things you can make because in general we're talking about bounty hunters and you know, having a second chance, new life type thing. It's just not the most clearly done. And then I do think it's a bit odd that there's only one section of the book that actually has backstories, and then we don't come back to it like ever again. But we'll get into that. So yeah, the usual thing we're going to do here is we're going to go through it kind of character by character here. And I have some of them I have like partial pages, some of them I have individual panels. I have a couple of full pages here. I don't think it's a massive amount of the comic I have on screen here, but I also, of course, have my physical copy here if we need to maybe show off some other stuff in the book kind of as we go forward. But let's start with Iroh, of course, here, because we've got Iroh, we've got June, we've got the new character Keung. I still don't know what the pronunciation is on that, but we'll get to it. So yeah, this is the big theme of the book. Like, if this arc comes up with Iroh, with Fawn, with June, and with Keung. It's the idea of effectively all of these characters had a different life to a certain degree during the 100-Year War era. And now they, for whatever reasons, whatever way their character arc is gone, they are faced with the challenge of they have to either create a new life for themselves in the Aang era, or they are just about to make that choice. And that's the big thing with this. And the idea is it okay to move on from a little bit of a darker, negative past and make a new life for yourself and sort of atone for any like mistakes made in the past? I think this theme for the present day arc of the story actually works really well. I think when like June comes to making her decision towards the end of the book, it is actually a pretty strong decision because you see some of the older characters like Iroh and Fawn having already made this decision already, and so I think it's very natural when June kind of makes her own choice, and you know, in the future she sort of is set up to make this choice in kind of the right way overall. Of course, the dynamic in the book, and this is more of the like description on the back of the book, is Iroh needs to figure out why the tea supply is drying up, and then also who hired June to capture him. And you get that classic Iroh dynamic where he's very comfortable just even in these very drastic situations. Like, he's been properly taken by June, but he doesn't think he's really in any danger the whole way through. He's just that sort of confident character where he just is comfortable of like, oh yeah, I'll face my past, no problem. I can handle it. And we saw that with like the Earthbenders in ATLA and stuff like that. But this is the big thing sort of at the start of the book, of course. It's this dynamic here, which is that there's a protester, as you can see here, outside the Jasmine Dragon, who's very anti-Iroh. And you sort of think that the way the book is going to go is that, oh, there's going to be a groundswell against Iroh. But actually, the people in the tea shop all are like, basically, hey, the war is over. Like, why are you still talking about that? He's made amends. He makes the best tea in the city. This is the best tea shop in the world. That's where what we focus on. He is an interesting person. We are aware of his past, but we don't blame him for it. Like, as in, most people allow Iroh to have this kind of new post-war life, and it's people who are kind of a bit stuck in the past who are the ones kind of lingering on it. But obviously, here's a more kind of minor example of like one protester versus what's actually going to happen to Iroh in the book, which is a much more significant person is going to sort of like kind of protest in a way the idea of his new kind of second life to a certain degree. That's the idea here. It's like, yeah, the war is over. And again, there is that nice contrast. They never quite word it as much this way, but they do very much play with the idea of it, the 100-Year War era and the atmosphere of it versus the very peaceful and optimistic kind of view, how much things are changing in the Aang era, which of course is where the comic is set. But we address, the past is always there, and Iroh's open about it. But the idea is he's able to move on from it. He's not just staying in his past, and that will be a big contrast to Keung, who will be sort of stuck in the past, and that sort of idea. We will address this. I think this is one of the first kind of big things in the book. Like, obviously, like there's the fights and stuff like that. June, goes after Iroh and stuff like that. The writers felt that they had to put this in an Iroh apology, basically, for the way Iroh acted towards June in Bottle of the Water Tribe. Effectively, what this amounts to is sort of, this is the kind of the note of, we are aware it's 2024 and it's not like early 2000s anymore. The dynamic we did in this episode with these two characters isn't really the done thing anymore. We are addressing it here, we are apologizing for it, and we are moving on from it. But it's also meant to be a bit of an icebreaker between the two characters, to go from it's just bounty hunter and their kind of prize to actually Iroh is someone who June can talk to if she actually opens up. He is not an unreasonable person. It's that kind of whole idea. So I think it was probably the right thing to do. I'm glad they didn't spend a ton of time on it, but it was the correct thing to do to, I think, address this. And I think it works within the dynamic of, these are two characters who know each other, but they don't really have a relationship. And so we have to address this before we can actually get into the idea of, okay, Iroh trying to maybe help June, and, the friendship that eventually develops by the end of the book can't happen without this situation, is effectively the idea. So that's fine. And, you can see, like, there is stuff like this as we go through the book, the idea of, he is asking about her future. You can see the setup for the idea that he is aware that, June, like, you have potential. What if you considered retiring from bounty hunting? And, like, what is there for you afterwards? Like, the setup for Iroh being the wise character to help June in her life. And that's there. But what I think is interesting about this book is that, to a certain degree, the big Iroh wisdom is probably actually given more to Fan, even though I suppose they kind of address the same thing with Iroh as we get through the book, of course. But yeah, this is one of the bigger points in the book, just from a continuity perspective, but also, like, this is the Iroh point to June. It's the idea of he can be happy in what his life is now. The contrast between him wanting glory as a Fire Nation general, but now he just wants to, have a fun time running the tea shop and bringing joy to his customers. He loves being in Ba Sing Se, the community in Ba Sing Se. And we get this reveal that he's actually dating Li Mei from Matcha Makers, which is very fun. So there's the context if you haven't actually ever read that book, Matcha Makers, the short story. They obviously established that the spirit kind of forced Iroh to kind of ask her out, and now they are actually a couple now, which is an interesting dynamic that I'm not sure we maybe expected to. So it is interesting continuity, because like for the most part it's actually very hard to judge where this book is set compared to everything else, but we do know that at least it's after Matcha Makers, which is interesting. There is this kind of theme as well about like Iroh talking about the idea of being rooted to one place, but then with June we're very much contrasting the idea that she as a character seems to enjoy not being rooted to one place and enjoys kind of having a life of adventure, traveling, that sort of idea. So this is the kind of big point here, is just like a Fire Nation general who at one point was leading the Fire Nation to victory in the 100-Year War is now runs the best tea shop in the Earth Kingdom capital city. Like it is possible to make these things happen, and June seeing Iroh say that to her is kind of very significant. So obviously we then get into probably what the main thing with Iroh in the book is. This is the main event for Iroh addressing his past, is when we get the reveal that it's actually his former soldier Keung who hired June to kind of capture him. He is confronted by his past again, obviously, and we're so familiar with this event, of course, but what's so fascinating about it is that when we think of Iroh and the Siege of Ba Sing Se, I think we inevitably always think of it as, oh, he lost his son there. It's this tragic event for him that sort of forged him into the character that we know him to be now. But here they present the more kind of negative view of that. The idea of, this is the event that, a lot of people died during this, not just Liu Ten. But the idea is that, other soldiers, how did they feel about the retreat because they were so close to victory? What about the soldiers who were left behind enemy lines? This stuff kind of comes up, and we tackle the kind of large ramifications of that decision here of, that can affect other people, and it's not just all about Liu Ten, which I think is quite an interesting dynamic overall. And then this scene here is one of the best done scenes I think in the book, where Iroh is perfectly fine to face Keung, but then he's faced by this statement here. It's okay. You couldn't go on after you lost Liu Ten, but what about the rest of us? Did you not, in any way, consider us to be like your sons too? And this gets to Iroh. That's the really telling point in this. This is what hits him. This is what makes him go to the ground and be like, I will do anything to kind of, make amends for this. Just let me know. I apologize. He does take responsibility for this, because he maybe could have tried a little bit harder to make sure that everyone got the retreat order. But this is the reality of what actually happened. And the idea is his approach, especially in life as we go forward, to a certain degree is like this. He does, in a way, treat almost anyone who's around him as if they were kind of his son or daughter. So the idea that he maybe didn't think that way in the past is kind of quite cutting to him. But then I also think the response to this is very strong also. It's this idea that, Keung asks him to die is the big thing. he feels he can only atone by dying. I think I have the picture down there of that bit when we talk about Keung specifically. But he refuses to die to atone. And I really like the way that this is done, because you have to at the same time put Iroh into this moment of like weakness, address the mistakes of the past, that yes, there were mistakes and not just a tragedy about what happened during the siege of Ba Sing Se, but that he doesn't have to just die because someone views that as being the only way to make amends for what happened. That his takeaway overall from like leaving the war at this point is basically pointless death, and you want another death to make amends for your fellow soldiers dying effectively. And he's just like, no, I'm old, but my life is still worth living. And that's a really strong one. I refuse to give it up to atone for past mistakes. That to atone, like, you do it best while alive, ultimately. And he has done his best to do that. And there's a previous scene where he even says it to Keung that I don't hide from my past. That, like, when we... I'll just go back up to it, actually, because it's not too far up. The point being here is that, yeah, they're aware that of his involvement in the 100-Year War. Iroh has made amends. Like, these kind of young kind of Earth Kingdom people, they know what happened. He hasn't hidden it from them, and they still defend him. That's kind of the point that they're making here. He has gone to lengths to atone for his mistakes, ultimately. And yeah, it is super, super strong, of course. And it's obviously in contrast to, like Iroh accepts who he is in the past, who he was in the past, and who he is now. And then Keung, as we'll get into, is the idea is he has lost himself in his quest for revenge. And that, like, he can't move on from the past because he has to get revenge for what's happened here. Even though, if he did just move on from it, he is in a new spot already. He's made so much progress from where he was, surviving the war. That sort of idea is fascinating as well. And then to a certain degree, the last big things for Iroh within the book are obviously that he is the one who comes up with the solution for the ruined Wuyi cartel. That Fan and the others should take over the tea trade and make it legal and all this sort of stuff. And then also that the bounty money for Keung should be used to hire June to work for him as a rare tea hunter. Which I think is a nice solution at the end of this, where it's revealed like she's going to make more money doing this. She's going to get to travel more, realistically have more adventures. And she's not, and it's not kind of underworld dealings that she's having to do anymore. And Iroh realizes that this is the right path for her, that she's retired from bounty hunting, but she's not ready to just, settle down just yet. She still wants adventure while she's, young, that sort of idea. He understands that about her. And so, yeah, the idea that for Iroh, he ends the book friends with June, I think is a nice kind of thing for him. But Iroh's plot effectively within the book does end with this sequence, which is 20-ish pages from the ending, if I remember correctly. There's still quite a bit of the book left by the time Iroh's kind of main character arc within the book ends, and then the rest of it after this is just sort of him being there to be the kind of support, advice kind of giver to a certain degree to June, which we have to get into June next here. So the main overarching plot for June is that obviously we see the idea of the world has changed. And this has changed what bounty hunting is in the world compared to the 100-Year War, compared to now. The world has shifted away from this kind of darker era. There's not as much of a need or a want for bounty hunting. And the idea is, what does she do going forward? That's the big thing. And, she addresses it here, that Earth King Kuei has changed a bunch of stuff, which makes bounty hunting a lot harder to do. So Doxia Harbor is one of the few places left in the world that really has any of it available. That sort of idea. And the big point being the world is a lot more civilized now and a lot less fun. But what we'll see with June is that she'll come to accept that it's a good thing that the world is more civilized now, but it doesn't mean that it's less fun. It's just like there's other ways to kind of do things effectively, is the idea. This dynamic I think is also quite good. The idea of one of the ways you really take down bounty hunting, or that the Earth Kingdom have, is by basically pitting bounty hunters against each other. Of like, effectively, we will pay you if you turn in bounty hunters, and so this is one of the big things, like betrayal of bounty hunters. And because she is friends with so many bounty hunters, she refuses to go down this path. And there's certainly, I think, a Dao Fei feel to the way June is, and I think we'll get this as well when we touch on the backstory with her father. She, more than like a lot of characters like this, definitely feels like there is certainly some sort of an honor code in place when it comes to being a bounty hunter in the right way. Like the fact that she does flat out refuse to, for a lot of money, to give over fellow bounty hunters. She does care about, Fawn and who she's friends with and what they're kind of doing. And, she really hates what, like, the Viper Bats, as we see in the fight scene, what they've done. That I think is quite interesting to see. They obviously don't ever bring up within this book the idea that she might actually be Dao Fei, but I think certainly it's reminiscent of that whole kind of idea, obviously. Now, obviously, this is the dynamic in the book. She is hired by Keung to capture Iroh, but at the time, she only knows that the head of the Wuyi cartel has hired her. This depiction of June here is quite good, of just the shock at seeing fellow bounty hunters now with lives as farmers. This is the big thing that kind of highlights that, yeah, this is a character who's not quite ready to go down this different of a path. She still needs a bit more adventure before something like this happens. But I like that she's not just dismissive of it. It's like, she's like, that's cool and it's certainly peaceful. It's not for me right now, but I'm happy for you. I do like that dynamic where you do get to see this more kind of open, less business-like version of June, where she's just like, okay, that's cool. But yeah, we seeing that Fawn and the rest of that crew, like tough, kind of vicious, almost bounty hunters. They're farmers now. What's going on? This really highlights to her that the world has changed, and then of course her getting to hear Iroh directly talk about his own change in life. This gets her thinking about, can I create a new life for myself beyond being a bounty hunter? And for a lot of the book, she's not ready for it, but then she realizes that actually this is probably a path I need to go on. And you can see in the early stages of the book, it's maybe not as focused on June as a character to a certain degree, but it's from this point on, like, we get the Iroh kind of plot happens, then June really steps into the spotlight, because her big decision happens once she kind of hands over Iroh as the bounty. That, here's your payment, but, I don't care about your opinion. She wants to defend Iroh. She even says, I think that, what's the quote? That person doesn't exist anymore. I think is what it is. Yeah, he's just a tea shop owner. Your revenge is meant for a man who doesn't exist anymore. That's a nice one, because at this point she realizes that, like, you just killing him I don't agree with that right now. So it's the first sign of, like, she defends Iroh, but she walks off and you can see lost in thought completely. So that's interesting. And it obviously builds up to this big scene here. It's the idea of she makes her choice, which is when she visits Fod and Co. on the farm, she's going to get them in on the job. We'll address Fawn's words later, but it's effectively just that idea that the first step in kind of creating a new life for yourself is always the most difficult one, and she makes that first step by basically the kind of the blood money effectively that she's been given. She hands it over to like her fellow bounty hunter, and it's like, we'll do one final job, but for good this time. And I do like that thing. It's a pretty, I think, impactful moment in the book where she just kind of slams the money down and is like, yeah, we're gonna do this job together to free the tea, basically. She has good intentions, you know, she's the one, you know, putting out the job, you know, it's a nice moment for her, definitely. And I also like this as well, that when it comes to the fight scenes towards the end, like Fawn and the others, she also doesn't use her bounty hunting equipment when she's fighting. She uses the llama paka wool scarf to fight up close against Keung, rather than like the whip that she has. Like Nyla isn't really involved in the fight scene here towards the end. It's just June using kind of farming equipment as well to win this kind of big fight, which is, it shows how skilled she is. Like she really gets a chance to kind of shine here, and especially like on her own. Like it's not just that Nyla comes in and starts, you know, knocking people out with the tongue. No, June gets to be like super strong on her own. They very purposefully don't really use Nyla much over the course of the over the course of the book. I think that's really strong. And then it builds up to this, like Keung accuses her of basically betraying her people. It is effectively almost this idea of, it's almost like, are you an abider now type thing. It's like, are you not Dao Fei anymore to a certain degree? But she's like, no, I don't recognize even you as being that way, because like you're not kind of honorable enough to be one of us, effectively. That the world is different. That's fine. Everyone, the people have changed, and it's not a bad thing. And yeah, I like that. I think this is particularly well written, that she points out Iroh, Fire Nation General to tea shop owner. But she includes Keung in this as well, and the idea that she sees what even he can't quite see himself. The idea that a military spy can now become the head of a tea cartel. You don't see that you have already changed. It's not exactly the way it was. And then, of course, and bounty hunters can become farmers is the other point as well. That she can change as well if she wants to. It's a nice kind of moment of finally realizing kind of the arc of the character. I think it comes together pretty well overall. And then, yeah, June, we'll get to June's backstory. I have a separate section on that in just a second. But the ending of her arc of like, yeah, she works for Iroh as the official tea discoverer. I prefer my rare tea hunter dynamic rather than tea discoverer, just as a wording on this. But it's still a very I think it's a nice ending for the character within the book. I was very worried getting towards the end of the book that June was going to be placed in Doxia Harbor with the others and Fawn and Co, and just we would never see her again. But I'm actually really glad they kind of more linked her into Iroh at the end, so she can come back, but she can go to Doxia if she needs to. Let's see, sounds like we're close to the end. Well, towards the end of June, because we're doing it kind of character by character. So we've already done Iroh. We're towards the end of June. There's still more characters to go through to talk about it more, and then we can have more general thoughts as we get to the end. So yeah, the ending I think is satisfying for her. She gets to be the adventurer. She gets to travel. She still gets quite a lot of money because there's a lot of money in rare tea apparently. But she also has potential routes to put down if she needs to. Like she always has like the Jasmine Dragon as a place she can come back to. She has Doxia, the farm that she can go back to maybe when she is ready to have a more kind of quiet life. But the idea is that she is now retired as a bounty hunter. So I think it's a pretty satisfying arc for the character, given that they seem to be sort of committing to the idea that more or less like bounty hunters full stop are kind of fading away in the world, and it's like maybe not as much of a thing anymore. You needed to evolve, change the character. I think it's pretty good. So that's a kind of a cool thing. Like obviously, is it a huge character arc? Maybe not necessarily, but we have gone from basically not knowing June to I think we have a better sense for her now. That it's not just classic business June. It's okay. There is some more to her. I think like some of the scenes in the book, like I liked seeing how she handled Keung in the two fights. The fact that like she hopped behind Iroh at one point to let Iroh take him out because hey, she's a smart non-bender fighter. If she has a bender on her side, she's going to use that to her advantage. I like, moments where like you get to see her smiling. It's kind of interesting. Lost in thought about certain things. Even this moment of absolute like, huh? You're farmers now? You raise llama pacas apparently? That side of seeing June is kind of interesting because effectively, like that's what we've done in this book is we've taken like the Avatar version of like Boba Fett, effectively the character who is a cool bounty hunter with some cool like accessories and a cool animal, and taken her into a situation where hey, we actually know her character a little bit more overall, and I think that's a nice thing to do. The question I think that we have with every one of these one shots is, when are we ever going to see June again? Like, when's the next time we're going to get a comic that actually features June at all? Because they've not followed up on any of the one-shot comic plots up to now, and even though I have more hope to maybe see her again at some point, it still feels like she's out in the middle of nowhere, and who knows when we will ever see her again. Okay, history comparison in the chat there. But yeah, let's talk about June's backstory. Now, the reason I separate this out is because fundamentally, June's arc, I don't think inherently relates to her backstory like really much at all. I like the backstory that we have, but it feels like we got like a random like 4 pages of a much longer backstory, but that the section that we were given didn't really tie into the main arc. So the big thing here is we got introduced to her parents. So at least we get a visuals for June's father and June's mother, and we get the sort of very quickly told story of how they met, and effectively why June lived a life on the run and kind of didn't have roots. Why she never had a home. Is because she was on the run because of events that happened with her parents, effectively. So the idea is her mother was a thief, her father was a soldier, and this is the story of how they met. Again, same problem as the Cabbage Merchant book, My Cabbages. Name the characters, please. Like seriously, why don't you just name them? Like, we are never going to get content with June's mother or June's father, like, ever again, basically. Why didn't you drop their names in here? And it almost, it makes the way the story is told of, like, her always referring to herself as, like, a beautiful thief just be like, okay, it's a fun way of telling the story, because I guess you don't want to just use your own names when talking to your daughter, but just for the sake of, like, it's the debut of these characters, can we please just name June's mother so she doesn't always have to be June's mother? Like, the whole like Ursa situation of, like, come on, like, let's refer to her by her name and not just Zuko's mom. Yeah. So the situation here, her mother would steal from the rich nobles and give to the poor, but eventually, she was captured by the Earth Kingdom. They set a trap for her with the idea kind of being that the nobles hired this, like, elite force to go after her, and they put a lot of time and effort into hunting her down when she was just kind of equally distributing the wealth type thing. And it's meant to be that kind of big contrast style thing. And so June's father was very much the one who saw this. He couldn't stand by while basically this team focused so much of their attention on capturing someone who was basically not enough of a criminal to, like, justify a task force being, like, made to kind of take her out type thing. It just felt like it's a nobles, like, abusing their power type thing is kind of what we're going for here. So that's fine. And then very quickly we just get, they fell in love, he freed her, they have June, but the Earth Kingdom is still after them. June's mother then sacrifices herself, distracting them to allow June and the father to get away. And that's kind of the setup for, and it links into some of the other dialogue, is that from there we set up the idea June and her father hunt bounties on the road, constantly traveling, and they have this code where they never do bounties for the other nations. They owe allegiance to no one, which is another bit of a Dao Fei. There's very much Dao Fei feeling to a lot of this stuff here. Of they are thieves, bounty hunters, bandits with a sense of honor, an honor code to them. And especially the idea of never doing it for one of the nations, not abiding by that. It sort of fits in. But you have, like, a million questions, I think, coming out of this. Because it's like, one, what happened to the mother? Did she die in prison? Dunno. What happened to her father? Did he just die at some point? Because I don't think it's preposterous to suggest the idea that both of her parents, like either should or could be still alive, because June isn't that old, as far as we're aware. So it does feel like they missed a point here to kind of explain, like, why is she kind of on her own effectively. And then thematically, okay, this explains, like, literally just, like, it is her backstory. Like, this explains the setup that we have from these two pieces of information. But it doesn't link in really to what the plot of the book is about. So it kind of feels just a bit kind of odd, because the book obviously is about June in a different era making a new life for herself. And I guess to a certain degree, it's, you saw her life change in the backstory, but, like, there's no clear, I think, connection intent with, like, what they're trying to do. But you can see where it comes from. of course. She spent her childhood traveling with her father, who was also a bounty hunter. This is where she learned the tracking and fighting skills that she uses today. She has no allegiance to any nation, only money. She uses a shearshoe to hunt. Her father gave her the shearshoe when she was just a kid, and they grew up together. And that whole idea, like, you can clearly tell that some of the stuff that we get here is based on this old information from the old Nickelodeon website. Similarly, the shearshoe Nickelodeon website info has some other stuff as well. A rare animal collector took it when it was just a baby and later gave it to June's father as payment for a bounty. June's father gave it to June, and they have been together for more than 17 years. So there's that. That's kind of interesting. In terms of, where's that story? Like I would say Nyla was underutilized in this story. I think it would have been a cool fun factor thing in the book to show us, even if it's just like a very quick 2 or 3 panel thing, just show us it being presented in that way. That whole idea. Do they use the term Daofei anywhere but the Kyoshi novels? Well, obviously the RPG uses it. We know Jiang is Daofei. I forget the exact details on how we specifically, I think, know that. Was it the game that I think explains that? Anyway, like there's stuff about that. Like it is mentioned everywhere elsewhere, but it's not so much mentioned in recent era information. It does seem to be the thing that sort of falls out of like use, or it evolves to a certain degree to not be as maybe organized of a thing, especially as you get into the 100-Year War era, the Ang era. So I think that's sort of the idea, where it's less heavily involved overall. Yeah, but I think the Daofei Jiang thing is Avatar Generations. Because like there was a little bit of an update that included some extra story on Jiang. And then we also had like Kiwok, of course, who's like related to like Fifth Nation, and like they're sort of like Daofei-esque, because like bandits, pirates, that whole sort of thing, and that whole situation. But yeah, I just come out of the June backstory feeling like why did you show us that part of the backstory specifically? And then why didn't you come back to it? I think it would have been very cool to have a section like later on in the book to further help June make her decision, where she reflects back on like something she learned from her father or something like that. And that helps her to make her decision. Because if her time with her father is the most defining part of her life, I'm kind of like, show us some of that stuff. Show us the idea that like Nyla, who is the most important kind of family that she has right now, show us her father giving Nyla to her, because that's a significant moment like in her life. And it just feels like a little bit like this book could have been like as close to perfect as possible for a book like this if you had, I think, nailed the significance of the backstory and interlinked it with the present day plot as effectively as it can. I like what we get here. This is really cool, but it does feel like a little thrown in. Like we have to put some June backstory in, but we're not super sure what exactly we want to do. That kind of whole idea. So that's all interesting. So yeah, the June backstory is interesting, and from here we'll go into Keung. So yeah, we find out he is the leader of the Wuyi tea cartel. and he's a former soldier under Iroh's command. I think this is a quite interesting kind of detail here. We find out that he's actually a elite military spy as part of like this infiltration unit that kind of Iroh was using, who he'd send like basically over the wall ahead of time to kind of clear a path effectively. So the idea seems to be that I'm guessing this is part of the greater plan to, once they break through, they have this sort of like easier time making progress after that, because they do have people on the other side already who can strike and have already taken down like key people and are hiding there. So it sort of sets the idea of like, even though Iroh says that, oh, it would have been really tough even after breaking through the wall to win, I think the presentation of like Keung's elite unit is sort of that this is what would have given the Fire Nation the edge to kind of advance forward, I think. So it is cool to see, like, even just this visual here, like, kind of Fire Nation assassin in the middle of a war zone. Like, that's kind of a crazy thing to think about, just like Avatar, Metal Gear Solid style stuff going on. Like, we've seen assassins type stuff before, but in one of the comics, maybe not as much. It's interesting. But yeah, the idea for his character is that he wants, whatever way he wanted, he wants revenge, he wants payback, justice for what happened to him. He was left behind enemy lines when Iroh retreated from the siege of Ba Sing Se, and we get this very interesting backstory where he used his skills like as a military spy to rise to the top of the underworld as this, leader of this cartel in Daxia Harbor. Obviously, we've had this preview page for a really long time now, but in context, it's a really powerful page because it's the tragic event for Iroh presented from a different person's perspective. That this was someone who was like, this is our big moment. This is going to be finally victory in this, the ultimate victory at the siege of Ba Sing Se. And you, like, betrayed my hope. Like, you were the greatest general who had ever lived. I wanted to be like you, and you destroyed my opinion of you by retreating right as we had victory. Like, that's a very interesting perspective on the day Lu Ten died. Just interpreting it as you walked away, you abandoned it, you didn't win the Fire Nation the war that day, effectively. But then also, they don't really cover it, but the idea of, yeah, what a crazy situation for him to try to escape. He had the skills to do it, but imagine that, like, the rest of his unit dead, and he just has to escape on his own from a battlefield, like, filled with earthbenders. Like, must have been a crazy situation for him. Which maybe links into one of the only few other criticisms I think there are with the book, and that is that I think the presentation is pretty good for Keung. I think he gets a little bit, like, brushed aside towards the end, where he's made to feel a little bit, like, overly, like, pathetic almost, whereas there's such a seriousness to him in the middle of the book. So, like, the resolution with him just feels a little unsatisfying because, he has a point, is sort of the idea here overall. But yeah, retreating at the moment of victory, his hero abandoning him behind enemy lines, his squad mates died. And then, yeah, there's some strong moments with him where he is extremely cutting to Iroh because he kind of hates him so much now. Is there anything I can do? There is. You can die. Like, that's kind of crazy, and is said to Iroh as well. And that he wants to beat him before he kills him. That's kind of shocking as well. And again, it is for him as a character, it's this idea of he's not moved on from the past. Even though he has done this amazing thing. Like, he's gone from being a spy to being the leader of this tea cartel. The idea is, if he just took a slightly different approach, he could have been the leader of like legal tea trade in the world, doing things in the right way. But because he's kind of so filled with anger, it was a tea cartel doing illegal activities that he made that is getting like protection money from other criminals. Basically, it's a pretty brutal kind of situation. But yeah, he's trapped. He's held back, unlike a lot of the other characters, by anger towards Iroh, of course. Avatar Studios better be working on a lot. Well, as far as we're aware, they are. At the very least, there is, 3 movies coming and at least 1 animated series as far as we're aware, but there's probably multiple of them coming if you kind of read into it more. But certainly, I suppose right now, in terms of heavy production, it's like that movie and that first series are definitely, making progress, of course. So, it is finally, I think, beginning to happen. We're probably in the final stretch with Avatar Studios where, like, this time next year will be in or around kind of where we are. Like, we'll be building up to stuff. Like, we should know proper details about what's happening by the time we're at this time next year. If not, I'm very confused about what the plan is going to be. Yeah, June does give him a final chance, basically, like, abandon your vengeance or face the consequences. He attacks, and this is where she and Iroh together take him out. And again, this is where, like, I think the criticism of Keung's arc at the end is just, oh, really? Like, they hand him over to the Earth Kingdom and collect a bounty on him. That feels a little unsatisfying. Like, Iroh feels like the sort of character who, okay, he's a little bit frustrated with Keung, but is he not going to try in any way to do something with him? Maybe there just wasn't enough time. Who knows? We said this time next year since 2022. Yeah, that is the unfortunate thing. Yes, we have been saying it for a long time. But I think the difference this time is that they've actually said some officially, like, public information. Like, they've announced the voice actors. So the more and more they kind of lock down kind of concrete information, the more and more they can't, like, go crazy with the keeping us waiting anymore. Is sort of the idea that it's already at a situation where, like, they're 2 or 3 years behind schedule. They have to deliver at this point. Let's see, movie next year. No, well, it's January 2026 is what the movie is at the moment. It's not October 2025 anymore. So 2026 is what we're expecting. Like, the launch of Avatar Studios. Overall, but that's have to wait and see. Like, there's still room for delays and moving about a bit, but I think they have to announce stuff next year, because you also have to keep in mind that that toy line, they have a toy line that stuff is going to be produced towards the end of next year, and once you have, like, the toys and the merch properly in play, there is a bit of a situation where it's like you can only hold that stuff back so much before you've got to put it out. And I think that's one of the big things that will really set into play that's going to happen. Will Paramount exist in 2026? Well, we're talking about stuff that we keep saying each year. Like, how many times has there been articles over the last, like, 3 years saying that Paramount is going to get sold or combined together with some other thing, and it's like, it's going to happen, and then it never quite gets confirmed and never actually gets pushed over the line. There's always this threat of it about to happen. It's like it's been announced they're going to do a merger, but then it doesn't actually happen. It's frustrating. Like it's not great that there doesn't seem to be stability, but there doesn't seem to be stability in the entertainment industry. Like full stop. Of course, it's just a messy situation all around. I think the only hope we have is just that, look, they've put so much effort into, I think, initial Avatar Studios stuff. We are going to see the first couple of projects. Are we going to get the, like, 3 movies, 5 series, all this, like, giant plan? Who knows if it will go to those extremes, but, like, we're getting the first couple, I think, anyway, and then we'll see where we go from there. Which, given how long it's been since the last animated show, I think is just, that's all we want. We just want something new, and then the idea that there will be something new pretty shortly after that is hopefully something good. But anyway, we'll move on. So yeah, next, I think this is the last characters I have here. Yeah. So the other new characters in the book. So we have Fawn and her crew. So I think she's a really fun character. Obviously, we don't get too much characterization on the other members of her crew, but Fawn herself, I think, is a lot of fun. The character design, I think, is quite good. I think you can immediately see that she knows June quite well, and so you get the more of the outsider perspective on the situation with Iroh, but then Fawn is able to kind of hit the point home a little bit harder because she knows June. So that's quite good. These 3, I think the character designs are kind of cool, but obviously there's not enough time in the book to develop them all. So it's just like, hey, here's Kinmei. He has a name. Here's Shu Hui. She has hook swords. And then Wicked Wei. I do like the Llama Paka stuff, as we'll get into here. Sweet Dumpling, the Llama Paka. It's a fun thing because they, like, the reference with Llama Pakas is like the Dawn of Yang Chen mentions a location called Llama Paka's Crossing, but we never actually like saw or heard about a Llama Paka, but now we see some in action. So cool stuff there. We also find out that they have fire resistant wool, which is kind of cool. So that's all kind of interesting here. But yeah, just highlighting. The whole point of these characters is to show bounty hunters can move on from their life as bounty hunters. So the idea that they're farmers now is a big point to June to present the idea that you also have a life outside of bounty hunting as well. So that's all kind of cool here. And yeah, she wants June to come visit the farm, which is a setup for later. And then we get this big scene here, which I think is really nice. This is the big moment that kind of gets June over the edge. It's like Fawn pointing out Iroh, he seems like a nice person, but June says he's not a nice person. He's done terrible things in his past. And then they're bounty hunters, so Fawn brings up, so have I. I've taken plenty of bounties from bad people in my lifetime, clients who I knew were hurting innocent people. Remember what used to be said about me, and it's that she's so heartless she'll turn in her own mother for a bounty. And the point is, it's possible to change even from very bad reputations. You just have to want to change. And the point is, the first step is the hardest one overall. And yeah, this is the hardest choice that she ever made, but it has worked out for her overall. Yeah. And that's the big thing. It's like, Fawn has been through this, Iroh has been through this, and, you know, June now has to make that choice, which we know she eventually does. She slams the bag down and is like, I want you on this job, and that's the big setup for the fight towards the end, which is what we get here. We get to see them all in action, and I think this is one of the most fun parts of the book, is that they don't seem to have their bounty hunting equipment anymore. So, like, this guy is like, what, cat owl claws kinmei. So I'm guessing he's meant to have some sort of a claw-like kind of stuff. He's using, like, garden trowels. One of they're coming in with their farming equipment instead of kind of other stuff, which I think is kind of fun. That it's not that they just happen to have their bounty hunting equipment in the back. They have truly taken on these new lives and accepted it. So it's a fun point here. They take down the tea cartel with farming stuff is the big thing. And then they're put in charge of the tea trade in the world, which I'd like to know what the progress is here as we get further along. Of like, as we'll address with Doxia Harbor here, it's like, how much evolution do we see in Doxia Harbor from, okay, it's now the legal center of tea trade in the world. I'm guessing it's a success. What are we like going forward after this? Because Doxia Harbor is, I think, very cool as a location. So here's, I think, the widest shot we get of it. So you can see here, of course, it's a harbor. The very distinct kind of stone kind of monument here at the entrance, and you can see there's even a building on top of it. I think that's very cool. Like, I'd like to know, like, what's the story behind that, basically. But the big thing, it's a former Fire Nation colony, and it's in the Huzin province, which is a fun reference, of course. Like, this is when Azulon at Azulon's funeral, they explain that, like, he had victories in the Huzin province, and it obviously helps to explain to a certain degree where former Fire Nation colonies kind of come from, that whole thing. Let me actually just get the exact quote on that. Let's see. Fire Sage says, Azulon, Fire Lord to our nation for 23 years, you are our fearless leader in the Battle of Garsai, our matchless conqueror of the Huzin provinces. Okay, so he conquered the Huzin provinces. So at one point he took over, I guess, this place, and this is why it is a former Fire Nation colony. So that's a nice detail, nice kind of lore connection if you caught that. Obviously, we'd love to know stories with Azulon, of course, but we have to wait and see on that. Yeah, and the setup for this place, of course, it's one of the last places with a black market and where a bounty hunter can get work. But it goes on to become the center of legal tea trade in the world. So I'm guessing by the Korra era, this is a hugely significant, like, trade port in the world. They seem to be definitely setting up the idea that this is... Iroh makes a decision here, puts people in charge, and something quite important is going to happen sort of coming out of this overall. So, I don't know. Will Doxia Harbor be a hugely significant location going forward? I'm not sure, but I liked it here for the way it was presented overall. So, that is Bounty Hunter and the Tea Brewer. Good book, but like I said at the start, it would be really nice if it was like one of like 3 Avatar comics that we had this year. But the fact that it's the only Avatar comic this year just makes me go a little bit like, it's good, but we have to wait a whole year for this. Why can't we have trilogies? Why can't we get more significant kind of stories? This is nice as an extra, but not the main event, unfortunately. So, kind of a tricky situation. But apparently, like they said at Comic-Con, publishing is going to ramp up. What that means, Who knows? So, next one, and I suppose that there's a bit more kind of to discuss here, maybe with the chat here. What do we want? What do we want the next comic to be? Here. Let's see. What's my rating out of 10 for this? What would I give this out of 10? Let's see. Okay, it's not a 10. I don't think it's a 9. So it's probably not an 8.5. So I think 8's probably the highest I'd go. It's nowhere near as low as like a 5 or a 6. So we're immediately somewhere in the like 6 to 8 range. Like I'd probably like give it like an 8. Like and that's factoring in the idea like it's a one-shot comic, and I'm not gonna give it a low score just because it's a one-shot comic. It's good, but maybe like not like absolutely amazing. So like I like maybe 7.75 ish. It's a tricky one to try and balance it all out. Like 7.5 maybe. Like it's somewhere in that range, I'd say. That's probably like what I'd give it out of 10. So like yeah, somewhere in the 7.5 to 8 range. I liked it enough that like I think flat 7 feels maybe a little low compared to like some of the other one shots and how I'd rate them. I think that's the idea there. But yeah, let's get to this. So for context, the first trilogy of one shots but we know officially was themed. It's the female Team Avatar members trilogy. It's literally Team Avatar Treasury, and they made the point that it's Katara, Toph, Suki. They've never really said that the current lineup is a trilogy, but now that we know they're collecting them into the library editions, we assume it's a trilogy. So the second trilogy is Azula in the Spirit Temple, this comic, Bounty Hunter the Tea Brewer, and then we are expecting them to probably announce the next one at New York Comic Con in October. But what's it going to be? So is there a theme to it this time around? So there's obviously Fire Nation Royal Family, because it's Azula and then Iroh. There's just Fire Nation characters, I guess, with Azula and Iroh. But then does June kind of fit into this overall? There's obviously this more thematic one, which is exploring the idea of redemption, or kind of your past versus kind of where you are now versus where you can be in the future. You can see like Azula has the potential for a redemption. This book was entirely about you can have a second life, you can start again in a new era, that sort of idea. And in that sense, who could there be? Like, we're not doing redemption with Ozai, but Ozai could be a possibility for a solo comic. But I don't think they would do it, ultimately. They could go Zuko, but I think it would have to be Zuko with someone else. So I think if they were to do Zuko, it'd be Zuko with Ki. It'd be Zuko with Ursa. You know, basically Zuko with his family. Or it would be Zuko with May. Which, for clarity, I think would probably be the most effective thing to do. Like, can we finally have those two get back together? Or is that a plot point for Avatar Studios content that we are going to acknowledge they're broken up and get them back together? So I'm kind of like, do the comics feel like they need to fix some stuff before we get going into the new stuff or not? That's certainly a way to, I think, make another big comic, is to go Zuko Mei, because it will get people pretty excited. Ty Lee, especially like before this one got announced, I think most people were assuming we'd probably do Azula May Tai Li as the trilogy. But obviously the Iroh June comic was a bit of a go in the other direction. But Tai Li is still an opportunity because I think she's very interesting. We've had short stories involving her. She's been in some of the main series now. I find, Kyoshi Warrior Tai Li to be quite interesting overall. In terms of non-Fire Nation characters, Sokka is the only one that really comes to mind because I think of the main cast in ATLA, he's the one who feels like he's never quite got the focus in any of the comics. And especially if you do the kind of theme up or team up with other characters, I think Sokka could work quite well. Like, it's another way to have a Sokka Suki story, which I think is very cool. Do you do the space sword story where like he finds a space sword? Because we know he has one when he's a decent bit older, but what's the story on that side of things? That's kind of interesting because obviously the June Iroh comic obviously tells us that characters of sort of June's level can't just get a book on their own. So what is a character who is I suppose what's the least main character who they'd be okay with doing a full comic on their own? And I do think it probably is, like Suki Mei Tai Li. And I'm not sure how many other characters there are that they could do that with. Like freedom fighters there, like even if you say like did flashbacks with Jet and you're like, okay, we're present day using the other characters, but Jet gets into the flashback, so we have Jet on the cover. Is Jet big enough to kind of make people go like, yeah, I want the Jet comic? Obviously hardcore fans, yes, but broadly speaking, I'm not sure. Yeah, let's see. Sokka. There's a lot of the crazy ideas here that are very kind of lore centric of like, yeah, Aang discovering the Sky Bisons. I'd love to see it, but like I can't see them doing stuff like that overall. Cabbage Merchant, like they gave him his own book. Of course, we got My Cabbages earlier on this week. That was kind of exciting. I don't think they'd give him a solo comic though, because I think you need the "it's for kids, so it's fun" kind of tone to it, to make that one work. Dante Bosco has been promoting Jet hard on the podcast. Yeah, the podcast. I never tend to read too much into like what they specifically focus on necessarily there, because like they still lean super into like shipping stuff on that podcast, and I'm always a little bit like really shipping Avatar shipping stuff in 2024, like yikes. But anyway, so yeah, Sokka I think works with so many characters. I think you could do Sokka with Freedom Fighters. There's of course my classic idea, Sokka with Chit Sang. What is the truth about what happened to him? He was innocent. Prove it. I want to follow up on Chit Sang. Temporary Team Avatar member Chit Sang. I want to see some stuff with him. And then like there's a lot of stuff like that where there is the Team Avatar B team that we had towards the end of the show for a little bit, like the Do, Karoo, Teo. Those are characters where it's like, yeah, maybe we can do something with them. But again, these comics, these one shots, you need someone big to kind of lead them overall as well. Yeah, Jet Rough Rhino stuff. I'm just trying to think of it in terms of like, like picturing the cover and like what they do here, because like the cover of the hardcover for this is going to be weird because it's like it's Azula and then like Iroh and June. So already it's a little bit like weird, and then do you have two more characters, one more character? Who knows? But yeah, we'd probably be expecting this to be announced at New York Comic Con. If they don't, I don't know what they're doing. Like, I suppose just like in the chat, like we're all on the same page here, where it's like, you know, this book you have to announce it at New York Comic Con. That if you don't, like, none of us know what on earth is actually going on. Because yeah, like the Mako comic Mystery of Pencon Island's out in February, and like, you know, they're not gonna overly focus on that. Like they've already done the kind of con coverage of that book. Like we're probably going into New York Comic Con expecting them to announce the next Avatar and the next Korra one shot. Maybe cover for Avatar. Maybe they'll just like verbally confirm who the next character is for Korra. But I'm not sure. Yeah, May Tai Lee could work. You know, I can definitely see that. But yeah, it's so difficult to pick, because this opens the door to like any of these characters, like with almost anyone else. Like we're gonna see some interesting stuff here, because, you know, to a certain degree, like I'm pretty sure, like, didn't Faith Erin Hicks basically say that like this book kind of happens because she happens to quite like June effectively, whereas like fans are kind of like, okay, the June, that episode kind of cool, I'd like to see more June, but do I need a full-on comic? Maybe not. So there's always that like thing. Usually New York Comic Con we get better coverage of than San Diego Comic Con. Yeah, because like otherwise I don't really know what to expect. Like it's in mid-ish October, so like the description for the Roku book 2, Awakening of Roku, maybe, but like I almost feel it's like a little bit too early. There's Korra comic. I feel they have to give us something on what the next Korra comic is. They'll have to announce what the next Avatar comic is. Beast of the Four Nations. Who knows? That's always the situation with that book. Magpie. I really want to know what's going on with the Spirit World book. But then they also have the Voyage of the Unity Kickstarter thing that's happening with that game, which that might be their focus, but that's also not fully Magpie, but I'm guessing the content is Magpie, so they need to explain that. But the Spirit World book I do really, really, really want. Sounds like there's going to be some good lore in there. Certainly. Beyond that, I'm not sure. Because then we're getting into like, that's the last big con of the year where we realistically expect news. Then we're talking about early next year, where we're talking like, okay, CinemaCon. We kind of expect news now, and it's going to be ever closer, you know, a year on. We're probably expecting some sort of a visual from CinemaCon next year, especially if we don't get a release date change for the movie, and that stuff. Let's see. Any thoughts on some of those supposed leaks on the concept for the Earth Avatar after Korra? Oh, this is all the situation where, like, when is CinemaCon? It's February, is it? I'm not sure, but yeah, the leaks for Earth Avatar After Korra. What can or should I say about this? I think I mentioned this on the last stream. I have seen the same stuff that the Avatarist has seen and what he's talking about. The stuff that Night Edge Media was talking about earlier on this week matches what I have seen for the Earth Avatar show. So obviously he talked about the idea of it is an avatar with a large-ish cat animal companion, animal guide, which is what I have seen in the animatics. And it looks really cool. The character has a prosthetic leg. Again, matches what I've seen. And then I think what Night Edge Media said was it's embossing Sei. I could see what I saw being bossing Sei, but it's obviously like it's meant to be in the future, and then animatics don't have a lot of background detail stuff going on, so that's a tricky situation. I could see it being almost any big Earth Kingdom city to a certain degree, and that sort of idea. But it's obviously an awkward thing to talk about, where it's this kind of leaked information where there just has to be sort of an acceptance that a lot of stuff is going to be put out there, and there has to be a case of like, hey, I'm putting out as much as I can about this, but I can't just like show you the whole thing because it would like, give away the sources. Like someone somewhere would probably get in trouble if this thing kind of properly got out there. At the very least, what I saw came across as being very like, it felt real to me. Felt like Avatar. So I believe it. But it's obviously going to be one of those things where until we get like official stuff, until publicly we get information out there and this stuff like maybe does get out there publicly, everyone's going to be a little bit like, I'll believe it when I've seen it. But that's always just the awkwardness of this, and the fact that they don't want to talk about it too early. Earth Avatar TV series 2030, maybe. But no, my guess would be like same year as the movie. Like if the movie's like January 2026, my guess would be that they would want that series like at probably at the latest, to a certain degree, summer or fall 2026. That's the whole point of Avatar Studios, to a certain degree, is to have multiple avenues of stuff happening at the same time. They don't want to put out a movie like what, 90 minutes, like 2 hours of content. Wait 2 years, something new comes out. Wait 2 years, something comes out. Their whole idea, and why they keep saying stuff like once we start to do it, there'll be a lot of stuff. Like, what do you mean by that? Well, it has to be the idea that they're working on multiple stuff at the same time because they want to have a bit of a, this comes out relatively shortly followed by this. How much has changed between then and now, I'm not sure. But it does certainly seem like there is a plan for, I'm guessing, however many seasons of the first show they have, and then at least those 2-3 movies that they have planned. That there probably is a plan where it's like, I'm guessing, movie and a season each year probably. Maybe the movies are separated out a little bit more, but that they want like to kind of be like boom, 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 and not stop right when they're kind of getting going. Because that's certainly what could happen with the movie if they put it out and we're just left waiting an eternity for whatever happens next, because the movie, again, like maybe we need to have this discussion here. It's just like we probably need to have this discussion again about this in terms of like that sort of idea. Like, this is one way they could go with this, which is that, this doesn't mean it's going to be bad, but are we okay if, like, this is basically what it is? It is kind of, for the most part, like, not too crazy detailed with the plots, but it's just the fun of seeing the characters just older, more powerful, just every single member of Team Avatar just taking out 20 characters with high level bending moves, maybe a little bit more of a challenge with the main villain, and to prompt maybe the need for a quick use of the Avatar state, or like the full team to kind of combo together, and we just do that, and we have a lot of the stuff that people have wanted to see, where like we open on a wedding, we end with the birth of one of the children or something like that, and along the way we confirm a lot of the romances, and we have cameos from the older versions of like all these characters all over the place. Or are we properly trying to, like, basically or are we trying to do this, or some blend of the two? Because like I can't see Mike and Brian maybe wanting to go all the way over here, but I think you need to have some of that. So my guess is like they're probably gonna try and blend these two things together ultimately, because it's been long enough that I think people are just going to be desperate and eager to see these characters again animated. And once you don't do anything silly, I think you're going to be okay. So that's the point, because like we know that of the three movies, like they're not trilogies. So like this movie is maybe not going to like link into like the other thing, because like we potentially know it's about different avatars, but I'm not sure how confirmed that detail is again. So if it is maybe just for now one ATLA movie and then we move on, what's the situation there? I don't really know. But I don't know, just they probably need to do this to some degree just to confirm a big box office. And then once you do that and you get the first series going, then we can kind of go from there. There's obviously, I think, the fear of if you go too experimental, you get some of the maybe G1 Avatar fans kind of complaining about things, and you start to go down the Star Wars kind of fandom side of things, which I don't think we want to do in Avatar. I think we want to stay as much away from kind of how crazy things have got with the Star Wars fandom, with the Avatar fandom. So hopefully we see what happens with that sort of thing. Pie Show, yeah, definitely we need Taisho board game. Why has no one done it? Why won't they make it? But yeah, that'd be cool if they ever did that. And then like the other thing as well is like starting off with the Aang movie, like they need to do it for a popularity point of view, but they need to be very clear that Avatar is more than Aang. And this is why like we need to be so careful about naming the franchise and stuff like this. Kind of really opening up the idea of, from an early point, we are doing projects in different eras. And not just like continuing forward. Like I think we all expect the Earth Avatar show, regardless of if you kind of want that or not. I think we all expect that to happen. But they need to really open the door to like, we can have a mini series about Kyoshi and it's fine. We can go to an ancient Avatar and it's fine. We can go to an Avatar right in the middle. We can do Avatar Zalir or something like that, somewhere in the middle of the franchise, and we can go from there. Avoid the situation that's happening in Star Wars right now, which is where Star Wars needs to evolve. It needs to go into different eras, but parts of the fandom don't seem to know what they want, and they're holding it in place, but they also want it to evolve, but they don't know what they want. And a lot of other fans are open to a lot of things, and it's just a really frustrating situation overall. And so this is why I think it's super good that we have the novels overall, to highlight the other eras. The RPG is out, and I think that's big, because I think a lot of the Avatar fandom is very open, especially if we ever do go back in time, because I think people enjoy the idea of, a lot of the end of the Aang era going into the Korra era has a lot of technology. You can take a break from the technology by going into one of the older eras and do a more classical Avatar story in that way. That's what kind of needs to happen here. You need to highlight what's going on with all this stuff. But I think that involves Avatar Studios needing to present a plan. Like, when are they going to actually announce this stuff? Like, because that's what they need to kind of, like, when they actually do the proper full announcement, like, will they do a Avatar Studios like slate announcement? Because I think they need to do that and be like, hey, I think what they need to do is they basically need to be like past, present, future, and be like, we are doing the thing that you all know and love, and that is like the Aang era, but they're older. That's the movie. We're also doing the future, which is the Avatar After Korra. That's the series. And then like build up to like the big reveal of like, and we're also doing the past because we're doing a mini series about Kyoshi. We're doing a kind of Chronicles of the Avatar like series, kind of like type thing, anthology type series or something like that. That's what we're trying to do. But they need to step up their marketing, I think, across the board, because obviously publishing marketing is very different from potentially what's about to happen with like the animated movie marketing. But like, it's almost the idea of if you're struggling to like get across that, like, hey, a new comic came out like a few days ago, a new novel came out last month. If you have not made that clear to people who are actively interested in this stuff, like, why should we have confidence that you can tell everyone about all this other stuff? Avatar verse, yeah, that's a bit frustrating. Yeah, Kyoshi seems like a safe bet at this point. Just depends on what you do. because I think people probably want the novel adaptation, but they obviously have said already they're not planning to do adaptations. So, where do you start a new story for Kyoshi? Like, what do you just follow up and basically have it be effectively book 3, or do you jump ahead a bit more? There's a lot of questions, I think, that have to be asked going forward, and you kind of wonder the whole time through, like, are we ever going to get a say in, like, asking what we want and that sort of thing? Let's see, maybe telling the story of Kyoshi versus Tagaka, kind of like round 2. That's cool, but I also feel like some of the RPG stuff is, like, maybe not going to be used in that way. Like, that sort of feels like a future maybe Kyoshi expansion to the RPG can just explain what happened there. But then it brings up, like, other stuff, like the whole, like, basically the death of Zaysan. When is that going to happen? That's the big question that I have, because I can't picture that happening in an RPG thing. Like, imagine opening up an adventure and it being like, you're going to play this story. This character's going to die anyway, but, like, your heroes are going to have to make other stuff happen around this. That feels like that's a canon event that you can't just tell in a adventure style thing. Yeah, that's definitely a big thing. It's like, yeah. Or this is something that I think, like, absolutely, like, needs to happen. It's especially if like you're not going to be able to hit every era in animation, at least anytime quickly. So I think the sooner they open that up, the better. This is why, like, when they say they're expanding the comics and all this, or publishing, I hope that's what they mean. Being able to do more than this. Just visuals for this, because, like, Avatar Generations was hype during that Kyoshi update because of all the art that we got. That was the truly, like, exciting stuff. It's just that new art. While I think we'll get a little bit of that as we go on with the new game, I don't have a lot of hope that it's going to be significant, really. That's the real unfortunate thing. Zaysan needs a novel. Yeah, that is the big thing. Yeah, novel, but it's very specific. Right now, we only have a very, very hyper specific novel, which is we cover stories about avatars when they are teenagers. That's what Chronicles of the Avatar is, and we need the novels as well to expand beyond that and kind of open up the idea for, like, one-shot novels and stuff like that as well. Official Kavik art, yes. Yeah, we definitely need more of a show-style Kavik art, which I'm going to guess that if Avatar Legends Realms Collide goes on long enough, we'll get Kavik eventually. But I don't really know what to make of it. Yeah, the story with Zaysan is super interesting because it feels like there's some giant incident at the wedding that's going to happen. I'm guessing probably the idea is Zaysan dies, but it gets blamed on the air nomads what happened. Because obviously Sozin is going to orchestrate it, but he's not going to be seen as being responsible for it, and that's going to really set up the whole situation. I don't think they're going to, like, kill a bunch of people. Because I think killing Zaysan and blaming it on the right person is the most, like, efficient way to cause everything that needs to happen, which is that would ruin Fire Nation trust in the air nomads, seeing their princess, killed in that way. It solves Sozin's problem when it comes to what's happening with the air nomads and the Fire Nation all at once. But we'll see how clever his solution ends up being, because obviously I think that the second you maybe go down the path of just killing everyone at like a giant event like that, you cause some sort of a major problem. Like we should have heard about that at some point, you think. But yeah, I still really want to know what's going on with that. Like, do we have... let me try and get this up, because I don't think I've really heard many people talk about it. This thing. Voyage of the Unity. Coming to Kickstarter. It's a Roku era thing. I don't think Zason is going to be super involved in this. I think this is more of just a side plot story thing. So I'm not sure how much like story implications maybe are going to come out of this, or how much expectations I really have for this. But it is some more Roku era content. Though I do think this is probably more about the physical items than maybe the content with what's going on with this. But I guess we'll hear about this probably in and around New York Comic Con. But yeah, speaking of which, actually, I probably should mention this. Probably saw me mention this on Twitter, but obviously they sent me early copy of the game, Journey of Aang. So I will have content on this coming out eventually. But still waiting for them to send me the instruction manual. Is the big thing with that. Once that happens, I'll be able to probably get started on stuff, and we can go from there. I'll show a little bit of this actually while we're here, because some of this stuff is kind of cool. For example, the board, which is it's pretty big. The map is super nice on this. If I open this up fully, is this super big? The map is really, really nice. And it's they seem to have adjusted it compared to where it was, where like you can see it's actually like annotated a little bit. They actually have like location names kind of marked in on it now, including like some slightly more interesting ones. Like you can see like Yu Dao is on this one. Sun Warriors, Pohai Stronghold, Abbey. They name all the seas as well, which I don't remember. Like, do we have names for all the seas? Like, they of course have Mosei Sea. They have like Yue Bay actually in on it. Arctic Sea. One that I thought was kind of interesting is also right there, kind of new name. Kaio Ocean is the one down here below the Fire Nation, kind of next to the Southern Air Temple. It's kind of cool. The only thing with this is that it's like Aang era, so it's not like super kind of up to date, but it's kind of nice. I was looking at it like the other day. It's kind of cool. Oh, actually, looking at it now, yeah, there's some feedback there. They spelt serpent wrong. But yeah, like it's not finalized. Like that. Like that's the big thing with this is like They said a lot of this stuff is towards the kind of finalized kind of version, but it's not like they haven't sent me like a retail copy. They've sent me like a prototype copy that they're kind of play testing with. So that's kind of cool. What else do I want to show off from this? Oh yeah, this is actually kind of cool. The Appa kind of player kind of token you get with it is really nice. Comes in like 2 parts. That's really nice. Nice. What else? They sent me some of these kind of patches for the game, which are also kind of cool. Actually, I should probably just switch this to this so you can see it a little bit better. Yeah, some of these are kind of cool. Cards, kind of interesting. All the dice, yeah, are kind of cool. Like these are the Avatar dice, kind of like pink ones. Water dice. I like the color on the fire dice, actually. They're kind of cool. Kind of like mix of black and red. Yeah, they even like sent me a thing. Thank you for taking the time to enjoy and showcase our game. But yeah, like I said, it doesn't have the instructions in it because that's if I'm to take their meaning, I think the idea is that the thing that probably actually goes through the most kind of design work is actually the instruction manual for the game. Just because that's the thing they probably need to be the most kind of clear cut on. So, yeah, it's for a board game. Journey of Aang. They're doing the GameFound crowdfunding campaign on this, which is going to be starting, I think, next month. So yeah, there's that. Yeah, so yeah, all I'm waiting for at this point is I guess they're going to send me the PDF of the most up to date version of the instructions that they have. I guess it's maybe not the most effective thing to just like if they're going to have to update the instructions for the game like that many times, I guess they don't have it like printed off all the time. But you know, it's just interesting to kind of be involved in it. So, yeah, it looks cool. It's some sort of a, just based on like the material and what I know about the game, it's some sort of a like dice building game where like you start off with a certain amount of dice, you progress across the map in the order of the episodes, and the idea is that as you face like challenges, you get there's like cards for like each of the different elements, and then like as you kind of spin them around by kind of completing tasks, you add more dices to your pool. And that allows you to get through more and more challenges, with the idea being that, like Ozai at the end, I think you have to like roll 10 fire, 10 earth, 10 water, 10 air icons at the end. So I'm guessing towards the end of the game, I'm probably going to be rolling like 20 dice trying to hit that combination. And it seems like there's some other cool stuff going on in it as well. So I'm eager to get that stuff. Yeah, Avatar merch. It's not been in a great spot. There actually hasn't been much this year, like at all. Which has been a bit of a weird situation. Like just very, very, very minimal merch this year. Like, what was the last thing that actually came out that was like proper merch? Yeah, I guess it was this, wasn't it? Yeah. The turtle duck. I guess the turtle duck, the tubs was like the last thing that actually came out, um, which is cool. But then they just announced a plushy version of this, and I'm like, if you had told me that ahead of time, I would have got that instead of this. But this is still kind of cool, just by itself, anyway. Um, but I think the main thing with Avatar merch is just like they've got to continue and like do stuff, because like say like these figures, I really like these kind of blind box Avatar figures, but there's no sign of like a wave 2. Absolutely no sign of a wave 2 on these things for whatever reason. Um, so some frustrating kind of things here, especially like no Korra merch as well. So I hope that when they have that 2020, late 2025 or whenever it comes out 2026 merch, Korra gets included in it as well. Yeah, because like these statues are good, but like they also haven't announced one of these in a while. The Diamond Select statues, and I'm almost getting the impression that they're either done with them for now, or I think what's actually happening is I'm guessing a lot of companies probably are working on merch related to like Avatar Studios projects, like the movie and stuff like that, and that actually like there might actually be quite a bit of merch when that actually comes out. So, that's the kind of situation. What's happening in chat here? So, someone's reading the Chronicles of the Avatar novels backwards. Is that legal? Nah, it's pretty okay. Chronological order. Yeah, I get that a lot. People asking for like, tell me the list of like every Avatar publishing thing in chronological order, and I'm kind of like, wait, you've not read like a single comic, single novel, nothing. You've just watched the 2 shows, and you're asking for like every piece of whatever in chronological order. I'm just like, you know what you have asked for here, and it's just like my advice when I get that is usually like, please don't do that. Like, especially with the comics, like, don't do that to yourself. This really weird thing where you're reading this short story from this book, then you're flipping ahead and doing this short story. Oh, now I can finally start the trilogies. And it's like, no. Just do trilogies, short story collections, and then the newer books, just like read them as they come out. Like, it's just like, accept that that's what we have to do as a fandom, because it's like eventually you get to a situation where you have something like this, and this book comes in, and it's like, well, immediately I've not read everything in chronological order, because like there's Korra books that happen after this, and you just have to accept that, okay, new book comes out, now let's figure out where it's actually set. And obviously, say from a book like this, you can tell that it's obviously like, okay, it's set after Matcha Makers, that short story, which itself is after some of the, at least the earlier comic trilogies. There's a 6-month time skip at the end of this book, so it's probably like more towards the end of things. And a lot of the Avatar comic stuff has been in or around imbalance these days, so that's probably where we that sort of thing. That's it. I'm not the right person to be asking. Is that everything? It is like it's one of those things. Like, I care about the lore, I care about the continuity, but for someone getting into this stuff for the first time, I would not recommend that crazy, like, you need to read everything in chronological order kind of type situation, because it just gets a bit like awkward. I think, because you get to like situations where like you have the Lost Adventures, but then you also have Team Avatar Tales, and if you do chronological order, the way you have to do it is like, okay, I have to read the first like 5 comics from this book, then flip over to this book, read this one story that's actually like halfway through this book, come back over here, instead of just kind of accepting that the short stories are written afterwards and slot into the timeline, rather than you're meant to read them in order. Because a lot of the stories are kind of like, in a way, written with the intent where like, okay, it eventually is revealed it's set here, but you only have the context for that because of stuff that happens like later on. And then especially when you get into like the really like the more kind of obscure stuff, and it's like, you know, like if you're doing chronological order, where does a book like My Cabbages fit in? Where do we tell people to read My Cabbages, when that is a story that by itself like tells the cabbage merchants like entire early history? And it's like, technically you have to like read pages of My Cabbages here, then skip ahead and stuff like that. That's why I'm very much like, the novels are self-explanatory. With the comics, it's just like trilogies, collections, and then when you eventually catch up, just accept you're reading the comics in release order, one by one. It's awkward, basically. My Cabbages is at the same time pre-ATLA, present ATLA, and future ATLA. Because it's, I guess the cabbage merchant sets off on his journey prior to when, like, basically episode 1 takes place, give or take, and then ends getting closer to the comic timeline. It's a fun book. Chronological order lists. Yeah, because I think when people ask that and they don't know how many books there are, they assume that every Avatar book, almost to a certain degree, has a specific number on it, and it's literally just a case of like listing all these books out in order, when actually it's like, wait, no, there's a difference between like a short story, a one-shot, the comic trilogies, and in terms of importance of story. Because then, like, it's always the point where, like, what, like, I think Be Calm, I think, is like one of the first short stories in Lost Adventures. Are you really asking someone to be like, okay, so when you're watching ATLA for the first time, I need you to stop a couple of episodes in, open this comic, and you need to read 2 pages, because this is a 2-page comic. You need this story about Aang messing around with bees, then get back to rewatching the episode. You know, put the next disc in. That's where it gets a bit funny, where it's just like, no, the stories are meant to be afterwards. And then, in terms of like deciding when a lot of the stuff is set, you only know when most of these comics are set if you have read the comics basically out of order, out of chronological order. Because most of the time we go like, well, this is set in between this comic and this comic, and it's usually the bigger ones, and just continuity. But I think that it's better that than some people can get, I think, oddly into the weeds on like the whole AGBG stuff, and even I sort of lose track of it when people start going crazy throwing those years at you, and it's like, what are we talking about? Like the video I did, I think it was earlier on this week when I was talking about what does pre-Four Nations mean, and I forget if I even included it in the video in the end, but just the idea of, like, the wiki mentions, well, like, pre-Four Nations is at least, like, 3,817 years prior to this, and it's like, it's so far before the Air Nomad genocide, like, why are we even using the Air Nomad genocide to, like, determine this point? But the reason we do that is because otherwise there's no point in the timeline that, like, it connects to, like, at all, because, like, we don't know what Avatar was around during that era, so it gets kind of tricky. But, like, to understand why it is that number is just needlessly complicated. Like, do I have that document here, actually? Yeah. Yeah, so it was this document here. The whole 4,000 year thing. I might have taken it out at the end. Yeah, I think I did. But yeah, it's the whole, like, 4,000 year thing, and like how awkward this is, like, to make this connection. But it's the only way to actually make this connection. But yeah, I think the idea is, like, it's like what, 4,000, and then it's like minus 18 because that's, like, Korra's age. Then it's minus 54, which is Aang's age that happens after the Air Nomad genocide, so not including the first 12 years of his life, and then, like, minus 100. So it's like, what's this? It's like 4,000 minus 100, and this is like 72, which is 3,828. I think I think this is the number, but then sometimes I think they use 3 here for Aang's age because of months, so it ends up being like this, which is how they get this number, and then this is BG. Yeah, so this is how this number, like, pre-Four Nations is this number, basically, and it's like, okay, Avatar Wiki, it's correct, but you have to jump through this to get to that point, which is it's cool, but sometimes, yeah, the BGAG stuff is kind of awkward, which is why I actually like the whole you know, in universe, to a certain degree, a lot of the times they go by, like, it's X many years in the era of this avatar, which I think is probably the most effective way to do it, but we don't know every avatar, which is awkward, because, like, we need to get the details on Yang Chen. So I hope we can finally find out, like, how old Yang Chen was when she died, so we can properly, like, assess the whole, when Yang Chen's era, kind of the details of that. But yeah, just weird little details, and yeah, that's where this whole video came from. This whole video literally, actually, I think originally came from me making a connection, because obviously this is from Reckoning of Roku ultimately, What we're talking about here, Avatar Zalir, and what Pre-4 Nations is, saw this number on the wiki and was just like, where on earth is that? How do we get it? And trying to explain to people like that, this is how we make this interesting but odd connection between all the content. But yeah, that's that. So yeah, I guess the stream is coming to an end for the most part. So any final questions or discussion topics that people have in the comments below, that we can kind of maybe wrap up with? Because otherwise, I'm not actually sure when the next stream is going to be. I'm going to guess I'm going to maybe try and do one, maybe post New York Comic Con, depending on if anything actually happens. I'm assuming we'll get at least one new comic announced, which should be enough to, I think, do a stream on. But we don't know for sure that that's the case, so we'll see what happens. Otherwise, I'm not sure how much news there's going to be, because like, there's the Netflix Geek Week thing, but I think our expectations for that is like literally actor announcements, and I personally don't find that to be the most interesting thing to discuss. In terms of like, a lot of the times I'm not going to know who the actors they chose are, and it's very difficult to speculate just on the basis of what's going on there. But yeah, the Mako comic, Mystery of Pencon Island, that's obviously super exciting. That's our next comic release. This one is shaping up quite well, I think. So I'll just open this up real quickly here. I think this has the potential to maybe be the best one-shot, even including the Avatar ones, because Mako is certainly a character who needs it. Bolin's also going to be in it. It looks like we're actually going to delve into some really key backstory for these characters on the mother's side of the family, and it might relate to the family in general. Once they, I think, get all that stuff right, I think this is going to work pretty nice, because like, they have a new location to go into here, and I think the potential for some good Mako character development is here as well. Like, we have most of the preview stuff here already, so like, it's probably not going to be until like early February before we get like the more preview pages than we have already. So I'm eager to see how this one goes. I think Korra fans, like myself, we've been pretty desperate for Korra content for a long time. Like, it's a huge gap, a massive gap between this and the last comic. So it looks like it's pretty good. Yeah, Mako needs this mainly just because they definitely made some odd decisions writing this character, I think, and it's taken a long time to, I think, get him back on track with some of the previous comics. So I hope this can be the start of a better era for Mako going forward, and that some good stuff happens in the future. Like, give me future Chief of Police Mako, please. But yeah, I hope there's a good like emotional character arc for him here. Let's see, is there still a Korra movie, or is that a fake? The Korra movie thing was always just like, the early reports were always like, this is a potential thing, this is a idea that's being thrown around in the early days of Avatar Studios. There might be a Korra project somewhere in the middle of all of this. The issue, of course, is right now everything is quite secretive, and so the only confirmed projects are movie 1 is Aang and Co. We've seen the one visual for it. We all but know the first series is going to be Earth Avatar after Korra. There are 2 more movies, which apparently are about different avatars, but I don't even know how confirmed that detail is. But it's not a trilogy of like maybe interconnected movies. So that leaves like the potential for them to maybe be about different eras, and Korra would certainly fit one of them. But I think the idea is, I can't see them not doing a Korra project at some point. Not to mention that, of course, Korra is still going to be a past avatar to the future avatar. The only one, in fact. So, that whole situation. Preschool show. Yeah, the preschool show is definitely an interesting one. If they want Avatar to be, like, super successful, I think that's something that could work. But I'm just eager to see Avatar projects come out like that, and that are just very different, because like it's so hard to predict all that stuff, because I think for a lot of us, like we can barely picture in our heads the idea of us getting like any new Avatar animation, because it still feels so far away, it doesn't feel real. But the idea is that in like, let's say just like a year and a half, that we'll have something. That first project will realistically be out. We'll have already seen it in the cinemas and stuff like that. That's super exciting. Hopefully it all finally happens, and all that stuff, because I don't know, like what do we think they're actually going to do for like the first like what is the official proper announcement for the Aang movie going to be? What way is that thing going to actually be shown off, like properly for the first time, with visuals, with a full title? In my head, I have no clue. Like, I'm assuming it'll be CinemaCon, because that would match up with the way they did the reveal for Transformers 1. And to a certain degree, I guess it would line up with, like, something that's happened earlier this week is like, from Paramount, Sonic 3. They finally put out the trailer for that, like at the start of this week. I like to think it was the start of this week. That was a long time coming. We, like Sonic fans, we've been waiting ages for that trailer. That kind of came a little bit out of the blue, but we knew that they had shown off footage of Sonic 3 at like some of these film show type things before. But who knows? At the very least, like, we're going to know every detail of this thing when it happens. Like, none of this is going to be hidden. It's just about, like, do they market it enough to get the general audience interested? I'm not sure. But hardcore fans are going to know. That's the big thing. Let's see. Yeah, see, look, confirmed. Avatar Studios, animated series, and movies on the official website. Not that there's a lot of detail on this website, obviously. But yeah, this needs to be better. Like, this is really not a great website. So little information. Hopefully it'll evolve. Check every day. Yeah, pretty much. I don't think I check the Avatar official website every day, just because it's been like, we've had like what, 2-3 updates to that website in like nearly a year. I don't know what the situation is there. Yeah, it's being worked on. It's just, I think we'd all appreciate like them being just a tiny little bit more open with the fandom. Like when they have Mike and Brian on the podcast, can you make it come across as if it's like, it's not painful for you to talk about the exciting new Avatar projects that you're working on? I think that's probably part of the big problem that some of us have with this. It's just like, you know, we've got an exciting interview, Mike and Brian, and then you're there like the first minute and a half while they're doing the intros. Like, anything you can tell us, and Brian's just there like, like, don't talk to me about this, and it's just like, okay, it's okay, we'll give you the time. It's not like we're expecting him to like reveal the full plot or anything like that. It's just like say anything at all about anything. But no. That's why I'm guessing next time they're on, if it's in like a couple of months, they're gonna have to say something like a little bit more. Just because they're I think once we hit 2025 and it's like next year stuff is coming out, especially because like, you know, we'll hit January 2025. As far as we're aware, January 2026 is the movie. You're in range there where it's like we have to talk about this now, and then we're talking like July 2025, San Diego Comic-Con. You have to basically have a panel for Avatar that's more than like a publishing panel. You can't do another podcast panel and be like, what animated projects? Like, you can't do that stuff where like they did this year. Bring on high up Avatar Studios exec who is literally there just to say, we're working on stuff. Oh, you want to know what? No. That's a tricky part. You just to kind of wish that there was an acknowledgement for like, you announced Avatar Studios like officially to everyone February 2021. Can you just acknowledge it's been like really long and you haven't talked to us that whole time, and give us some hint that like it's going to be better. That's just, I think, what we want at this point. Yeah, and then that's the other point is like, what's the point of bringing on the executive if you can't talk about anything? I don't know. Like, does anyone know what Isabella Butcher actually said at the San Diego Comic-Con panel? Because I don't know. Apart from that one detail that I think got reported like a few days after the fact, I have no clue what her involvement in that panel was. I think someone said they had her voice one of the comic panels they acted out because it was mostly a voice actor panel. But that's a bit of a weird thing to do with what like the creative executive or whatever her role was on Avatar Studios, to like voice as one of the minor characters in the book. It's just a bit like, come on. Yeah, we're 10 years post Korra. Oh yeah, that's coming up, like, isn't it? Yeah, 10-year anniversary of the finale. Yeah, December 19th. So yeah, December 19th. 2024, it's going to be 10 years of Korra, yeah. Yeah, Avatar Studios was announced too early. It definitely was. I think the more we look at that, the more we realize that did they literally do the handshake agreement on Avatar Studios like behind the scenes before they like actually just came out and announced it, because they had like nothing ready. I think probably the most telling part of that is that the video they have showcasing Avatar Studios doesn't even have the Avatar Studios logo, but then the like social media announcement of it actually does have the logo, and it's like, yeah, you kind of you announced this when you had nothing but like one discussion maybe ahead of time or something like that. Which I think is why we hope that when they do the big announcements that they are actually kind of big and significant, and not just like the trailer comes out randomly in some place. And you know, we want that kind of hype build up of like they announce like multiple projects at the same time, and that they really get across this is the whole idea of Avatar Studios. That like it can't just be the same as Avatar, it can't just be the same as Korra. The whole point is it's different now, but you know, we just want new Avatar animation, I suppose, is the main takeaway, regardless of like potential plans they've announced ahead of times. We just want some new stuff. We just want to be super excited about Avatar animation again. And I don't know, like, I don't think they're going to announce anything about Avatar Studios, like, in relation to the Korra 10-year kind of anniversary, but I think it would be a kind of nice thematic thing to kind of do, and just to highlight that, say something early as much as you can. If they have any early information, that would be a nice date to put it out on. Because we are expecting them to have some sort of a like early announcement about this. Because like we've known about the Aang movie for like 2 and a bit years now. And it's out in like a year and a half. But apparently like the first show is going to follow up like potentially within like 6 months. Certainly not more than a year afterwards. And we are only now just starting to get the very early kind of hints and teases, early information about it. And it's all like rumored right now. So when are they actually going to say anything about that is the big situation. But yeah, probably going to wrap up the stream there. Like I said, next stream, maybe October, because obviously this one's start of September. So yeah, it would make sense. Probably next month, post New York Comic Con. So assuming there's almost like any announcement, I'll probably do a stream next month. And then for the rest of the year, not really sure what there will be for the rest of the year. We obviously have the launch of we're gonna have the mobile game. I guess we can maybe a stream about that, but I really don't think that game is going to be particularly like good for watching on a stream. So that's a bit of a worry when it comes to that. I don't think it's riveting gameplay going on there. So yeah, we'll definitely get the news from New York Comic Con. A lot more people are going to be at this one who are, I suppose, more involved in the fandom. Let's see. I'm going to keep your novel chapter vids. They're really helpful. Yep, that's why I put them out there. I'm always glad to see people kind of watch through them and see them kind of going through them one by one and getting the details. Will you be doing your top 5 story moments early this year? Like it'll be early, but not like super early. So like, it won't be like really soon, but like, yeah, it might be like November. Just waiting to see if maybe something drops towards the end of the year. I don't want to do it like super early, but yeah, it'll be probably before December, where some of the other end of year videos will be. But yeah, New York Comic Con is definitely the next big thing. So yeah, thanks everyone for coming out to the stream. Thanks for watching, listening, and bye.